Now let's talk federal politics and a recent vote by Southwest Washington Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp Perez that caught our attention. Although she called it, quote, deeply flawed and said it wasn't likely to pass the Senate, Perez was one of 4 Democrats who voted with Republicans in the House for the SAVE Act. That's the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. And it's meant to make sure only U.S. citizens are voting in elections. It would require you to provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote in federal elections. You'd have to present a valid U.S. passport or a government-issued ID card alongside a certified birth certificate, and your name has to match. The bill passed the House last week. Republicans say non-citizen voting is a problem, and they're worried it could change the outcome of elections. Well, today we talked with Reed College professor Paul Gronke, who runs the Elections Voting and Information Center, and he says the data just doesn't support that claim.
Well, there's been many studies of these, both in the Northwest and nationwide, and it is a minuscule problem. It's tiny. There are folks that will slip through the cracks for a variety of reasons. We had an unfortunate circumstance in Oregon, but that was really related almost literally to an input form and clerks at the Oregon DMV not being properly trained in how to discriminate among certain kinds of passports where people are eligible or not. But it didn't impact any election outcomes, and there's no evidence really that it's impacting any outcomes anywhere.
He's talking about the problems with Oregon's motor voter law. The Department of Motor Vehicles incorrectly registered just over 1,600 people to vote, people who were not U.S. citizens, and at least 17 of them cast a ballot. And just last week, ODOT reported an additional 118 cases of people being registered in error, stretching back to 2010. Critics of the SAVE Act say the requirement to prove citizenship would create a big hassle for a lot of people and discourage voting, especially for older people, people in rural areas, and people who have changed their name, like some married women. Gronke agrees.
Any burden needs to be weighed against the problem. And as we already said, the problem here is minuscule to non-existent. But the burden, well, the evidence that we have from multiple organizations really across the political spectrum and just nonpartisan researchers are that somewhere around 20 to 22 million Americans don't have that documentation. In most cases, they don't have a birth certificate available anymore. The numbers vary. The estimates are around 6 to 7 million married women may have a birth certificate that does not match their driver's license or current identity documents because they changed their name when they got married. That's an issue for everybody knows why, more burdensome for women than for men. And attaining these documents is not easy and it can cost some money.
Washington Rep. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez says she voted for the bill because it's what her constituents wanted. She told us, "I do not support non-citizens voting in American elections, and that's common sense to folks in Southwest Washington. Voting in our nation's elections is a sacred right belonging only to American citizens, and my vote for the SAVE Act reflects that principle." But she went on to imply that her vote doesn't really matter at all, writing, "I also understand the SAVE Act stands no chance of passage in the Senate due to the filibuster, as well as several deeply flawed provisions. One of those provisions," she said, "would invalidate ballots postmarked by Election Day if they are not received by Election Day." She said she stands by Washington's vote by mail system, calling it safe, secure, and reliable. When it comes to Oregon's representatives in the House, they voted along party lines on the SAVE Act. The bill is now with the Senate for consideration, and in order to overcome the filibuster that Gluesenkamp Perez mentioned, 7 Democratic senators would need to join all Republicans to meet the threshold, a tall task that many argue won't happen, but we'll be watching.